Very much my pleasure to introduce Clarissa Hurst from the Financial Services Council. Riss is going to run a session with Sam from AIA. So Riss, I will hand over to you.
Great, thank you, Tricia, and kia ora, everyone. I'm Clarissa Hurst, Head of Content, Comms and Marketing at the FSC, and it's my absolute pleasure to introduce the presenter for this next session. Sam Tremethick is AIA New Zealand's Chief Partnership Insurance Officer and has extensive experience in the financial services sector, both here in New Zealand and overseas. Sam's main focus is to deepen AIA's relationships with their distribution partners and improve their service delivery so they can provide faster quality outcomes for their customers. Now, here at the FSC, our vision is to grow the financial confidence and wellbeing of all New Zealanders and the financial advice community. So many of you watching today, you're intrinsic to helping us do that. But how are you, New Zealand advisors, actually faring in the current climate? What's impacting your health and wellbeing, and what can we as an industry do to support you in supporting your clients? So I'd like to welcome Sam here today to share some of the very recently released, as of this morning, key findings from the New Zealand Advisor Wellbeing Research 2021. Sam's going to give a brief presentation and then we'll open it up to some Q&A. So as he's presenting, please drop your questions in the Q&A and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. Over to you, Sam.
Yeah, thanks, Clarissa, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for that very kind introduction. I just want to call out Matt as well. You know, a great presentation, Matt, and what, you know, it was a real inspiration to me, and I think a great example of what a positive mindset, even during difficult times, can have on your business. And I think that provides a nice segue as to what we're talking about today. Now, you know, firstly, I just want to thank the FSC for giving me this platform to be able to share this research with you. I hope today is the start of a conversation and a start of change for the industry. So look, indulge me just for a moment and you know, be you're in a Matt, be you're, you know, a film producer, having in your mind a great Hollywood movie, and as Matt sort of comes over in his helicopter and comes over the mountain and the picture comes into focus, there's a healthy, degree qualified advisor getting off their bike after a morning ride, a passion they love, and also something that they do to relax and to recover. So if we could just go to the next slide. Look, these people would be referred to as mammals in any other social circle, but the image could also represent an advisor in flow, an advisor working with engaged clients, supporting their financial wellbeing, an advisor with a deep sense of work satisfaction, an advisor with, you know, a higher purpose, knowing their why and clearly being able to articulate their value proposition to their clients. This advisor has a deep relationship not only with their clients, but with the regulators and the industry bodies. They are working in a larger private corporatised practice, one which provides holistic financial advice. They have a positive physical and mental wellbeing, which provides, you know, and they prioritised adequate sleep and the minimal use of alcohol to respond to stress. They have a healthy work-life balance with lots of hobbies, and hobbies in this case is cycling. So as a happy dream sequence music sort of starts to play and the edges of the frame start to soften with the warm light, you know, we realise that this is the dream, the utopian vision of financial advisors in New Zealand. And it's not the reality for most. So like any Quentin Tarantino film, what we've done here is we've started at the end. As the opening title sequences start to sort of draw to a close, we're transported back to reality, back to where our story really starts. And if I could move to the next slide. The harsh reality is that although we're doing better than our colleagues in Australia, there are some concerning signs for the advice industry here in New Zealand. 41% of New Zealand advisors had a moderate to high risk of mental health. This is virtually double the New Zealand general population. 43% of the advisor community are using alcohol in some capacity to manage their stress. And 50% are saying they're often feeling burnt out. 58%, and this is something we all need to reflect on, feel that they get very little support from their industry associations. And 41% believe they're getting no support from their FAP licensee or dealer group. But let me get into the detail of the results, shortly during this presentation. If I could skip to the next slide, what is this all about? AIA commissioned Dr. Adam Fraser and Dr. John Molyneux to do this study, to actually understand the current state of wellbeing of the advisor community. The research aimed to answer the 3 questions that are posed on this slide. 592 advisors participated in the survey, and it was both an online questionnaire and also some in-depth interviews. The research was conducted in September and October last year. Now, it is at a point in time, but I want to acknowledge that at that point in time, the CCCFA legislation hadn't come into play. And if you believe everything that we're seeing and the feedback that we're getting, this legislation may have caused more stress for some advisors, particularly those mortgage brokers who, and I'll just want to acknowledge this, probably scored worse in a lot of the results compared to other financial advisors in the sector. I also want to acknowledge that this research was conducted whilst Auckland was in a red level setting, with a number of restrictions, including travel bans, etc. So this may have created a bias in some of the feedback. But that said, if we look at fast forward to today, we've got, the pandemic at a new stage with quasi, lockdowns in place. We're seeing interest rates continue to rise, inflation continue to rise, geopolitical instability, global investment market correction. So you could argue that now is actually more stressful than the time that the research was undertaken. But let's focus on some of the more confronting results in the report. Now, the report is very detailed, and I'll only get a chance to cover some of the high-level pieces here. But if we could move to the next slide, as I said, 41% of advisors have a moderate to high mental health risk. And this clearly shows up in those leading indicating questions. So questions such as, are you tired, or do you experience tiredness for no reason? Do you experience nervousness, or is everything an effort? 44% believe that their work stress is impacting their sleep. As I mentioned earlier, 43% use alcohol to ease work-related stress. 20% are seeking medical help for their stress, which is somewhat positive that people are putting up their hand and acknowledging it, but also somewhat confronting that 20% of those surveyed acknowledge that they need medical support for their stress levels. 25% are considering leaving the job that they're currently in due to stress, and over 50% have said that they have high workloads, indicated by the fact that they never feel that they can get on top of things, and 50% feel burnt out or stressed. But why are people feeling stressed? Why are the advisor community feeling stressed? And we asked what those drivers for stress were. And look, 61% of the advisors surveyed said that stress was being caused by government regulations. 37% said it was the stress of actually needing to meet future education requirements. 42% were saying that it was workload driven. 29% said it was balancing, the work-life scenario. And 27% said it was actually managing revenue. Now, if I can move to the next slide, the increase in compliance and regulation is something that, is causing advisors stress. And it's something that came through a lot in the verbatim responses and in the interviews themselves. And this is something that we've raised with the FMA directly last week. So we had a meeting with the FMA to discuss this. Let me just be clear, though, this research is not about being anti-regulation. AIA fully supports the introduction of regulation that improves the professionalism of our industry and drives better customer outcomes. But I will say, and I think it's something for all of us in the industry, we need to do a better job of supporting advisors through this change. And it was great to hear the FMA earlier talk about their openness and willingness to engage more frequently with advisors during this stage. The positive, though, out of this research is that it's not all doom and gloom. And I'll get you just to move on to the next slide. 90% of advisors say that they're happy in their job. Only 7% said that they didn't find their work meaningful. More importantly, around 50% of the advisor community are working 35 to 40 hours per week. This is great for at least the starting of the journey of work-life balance. Most advisors rated their interest or enjoyment in the role as 8 out of 10. And 83% surveyed said that they wanted to continue in the industry in some capacity. I will acknowledge, though, what really separated out the good from the great seems to be purpose. And purpose is, a key contributor to positive wellness. And whilst I'll steal from Simon Sinek here, it appears that those advisors that can clearly articulate their why seem to have more positive impacts in their wellbeing. So put simply, having a clear purpose leads to higher client engagement. And I'll just move on to the next slide. So client engagement was the largest predictor of a positive wellness score. Advisors with highly engaged clients who understand the value that they offer and were more likely to score highly in work-family balance, well-being, mental health, being in flow, that ability to work constructively and immersed in a task. Conversely, those that had lower client engagement scores were feeling higher levels of stress, were more inclined to use alcohol as a support mechanism, and really highlighted that they had higher impacts on their mental and physical health. So working with engaged clients who understand your why, the why you believe passionately in financial advice and why you think it makes a significant difference, clearly has positive outcomes, not only on your mental health, but you would argue also on your business success. Not surprisingly, another indicator of positive well-being is business success. Success breeds success. So those with more successful businesses, surprisingly, were experiencing less stress. But moving beyond client engagement, the research also identified a number of other things that advisors should be considering doing to support their mental health. So I'll just move to that next slide. I won't go through all of these, and all of these are part of our report that, as Clarissa mentioned, is available on the website. So if we go to the next slide, so I'll just focus on three that I thought resonated not only for financial advisors in the industry, but also all of us participating in the industry. And really that's finding a good mentor. And so we saw a direct correlation in results with those people that had a mentor or acknowledged that they had a mentor, whether it's in the industry, a business, or a personal mentor. It made a huge difference in the way that they looked at their business and challenged the way that they do things. We also saw that those that actively sought support from the industry also had a more positive wellness score. So, the research, recommended getting support from your FAP, from being a member of fans, or reaching out to product providers. The support is there. I think the key thing here is that you need to actively ask and actively engage with that level of support. And lastly, and something close to my heart is that ability, or that focus on engaging in regular activity, whether it be physical activity, mindfulness, hobbies, etc., as a way of recovery. It's not surprising, but a good reinforcement. The research found that those advisors that do regular exercise and focus on recovery are had far more energy at work, and they obviously had better health and wellbeing outcomes. So if I could just move to the next slide, what are we doing with this? And I think this is the critical piece. We know that an analysis gets answers, but action gets results. So from an AIA perspective, we just want to be transparent with our commitments. We know that there's more to be done in the industry when it comes to advisors' mental health and wellbeing. This is an industry issue. It's not an AIA issue by any means, but we're committed to leading and really forging ahead with some change. So over the coming months, we want to share this research with as many people as possible. We want to get this out there and start the conversation. We want to start the conversation with our industry bodies, with the FSC, and look to work with them on ways in which we can, make this top of mind and react to it. We want to discuss this research with government stakeholders and regulators to facilitate change. And as I mentioned, we took the FMA through this research last week, and we look to do that with various politicians as part of our government relationship strategy. But on a more granular level, and this is something that I'm genuinely very proud of, from today, AIA will be extending our Best Doctors offering to all advisors that we have a relationship with. This will be made available at no cost. So for those that are aware of the Best Doctors offering, it's a fantastic service for securing a second medical opinion for any medical diagnosis, as well as providing access to a range of medical experts, including those specialised in mental health. So from today, we want to make that available to all advisors in New Zealand who we have a relationship. We also want to do a number of wellness-focused events and sessions, building on the success of our Peak Performance Summit last year. We want to continue to make sure that we're focused on the health and wellbeing of our advisor community to ensure the health and wellbeing of our industry. We're also going to make some serious, some dramatic enhancements to our AIA Vitality program, and looking at ways in which we can build in more tools and more support services around mental health. We'll also be working with our Vitality partner, the Mental Health Foundation, to look at specific ways in which we can do bespoke events and bespoke training for advisors. And lastly, as I said before, we want to challenge other New Zealand insurers, fund managers, and financial services organisations to look for ways that they can help build a strong and robust financial advice industry. So if I can move to the next slide, and really this is my closing slide. The purpose for undertaking this research was to really understand where New Zealand advisors were at. We know that they're doing some great work. We know there's some out there doing some great work and are genuinely thriving. But we also know that there's some that are really struggling. And just half of those, just under half, risk poor mental health. And then that's not good. That's not okay. So we need to do more. As I said, the full research is now available on the website, so aia.co.nz. And I encourage you to read it. It is detailed, but I think you can form your own opinions of some of the key themes that are coming through. But really what we wanted to do today was to start the conversation. We want to make the wellbeing of the New Zealand advisor force a priority, because we know that with healthy advisors, we will build a healthy industry. So I hope it's not just the start of the conversation. I hope it is a start of genuine change. So thank you for giving us this opportunity to share this research with you. Thanks, Clarissa.
Thanks so much, Sam. That was a really, really great presentation and overview of the research findings, and a lot of food for thought there, I think, as well. Now, we don't have a lot of time for questions, but there are a few that I'm really keen to ask you. And one is around the demographics, so the people that responded to the survey. Who were the advisors that responded? You mentioned there were some types of advisors that were hit harder. Who were these groups, and why do you think that is?
Yeah, look, great question. So look, at a very high level, 65% of the respondents were male and 35% were female, or thereabouts. 56% of the respondents were aged between 40 and 60, and really it was near enough to 20% either side. So 20% over 60 and 20% under 40 really made up the group. Interestingly, from an experience perspective, and there wasn't a lot of correlation necessarily between experience and wellness, but just over 40% had under 10 years experience, and just over 55, 57% had more than 10 years experience. From an advisor segment perspective, a little over 30% considered them or classified themselves as mortgage brokers. So they were the highest group of respondents. 29% considered them or classified themselves as insurance brokers. And the remainder was sort of a mix of whether they classified themselves as advisors, holistic advisors, licensee managers, etc. So, there is some, rubberiness of that result just because of how people classify themselves. But I think, largely a large portion of, it was a good cross-section of investment advisors, mortgage advisors and risk advisors. I will say, though, that, the mortgage advisors probably were struggling a little bit more than others. And I suspect, and this is my hypothesis, not necessarily the research hypothesis, is that it's the more transactional nature of that brokerage business, in the sense of when you look at client engagement as being one of the key contributors to wellness, being a financial advisor offering financial advice on a more holistic nature allows you to build a relationship with your clients over time and allows you to demonstrate that purpose. On a mortgage broker, it's far more transactional, and I think that that's where some of these stress points come for them.
All right, interesting. Now, you mentioned that about 35% of the respondents were female, and I'd just like to ask you about that, whether there were any differences in terms of the wellbeing or some of the issues facing male versus female advisors. We're holding an event on the 1st of March, which is focused around women in financial advice and the challenges and opportunities facing female advisors. So I think it would provide some really good context for that discussion.
Yeah, look, and there was. Look, I acknowledge that 35% of the survey respondents were female, so it's a slightly smaller sample, but I think it's still meaningful enough to draw some conclusions. And I don't think anyone would be surprised. And I do highlight this was done during a period of lockdown, some homeschooling, etc. But a lot, women scored worst in work-life balance. And if my home's any reflection of the general population, is my wife, to her credit, shoulders a considerable burden of both keeping a full-time job and also being the primary caregiver. So it doesn't surprise me in that respect that, given when the survey was done, that work family balance challenge was probably more exaggerated for the female advisors that scored. But interestingly, and I think one of the positives to come out of the research is the female advisors were far more or scored far higher in focusing on self-development, and they also scored far higher in engaging the industry support. So they were more inclined to engage with their industry bodies and also their industry peers, and more likely to have a coach. So I think there is definitely some learnings there, both for things that we can further accelerate and enhance, but also some learnings for our the male advisors to learn from their female counterparts.
That's really heartening to know that there was some really positive results there as well, positive findings, because often the narrative can be quite negative when it comes to female experiences. So that's really heartening to see. Now I'm conscious of time, so I'm just going to wrap it up with one final question for you. So obviously you mentioned AIA had done some similar research with Australian advisors, and you also mentioned that it seems like New Zealand advisors are faring a bit better. But what's the trajectory looking like? Should we be looking to Australia as where we could be heading if we don't take action now? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, really good question. And look, I do want to premise this is, yes, AIA Australia conducted the same research to be undertaken by the Australian advisors. So we do have a really good comparison tool, and there are some stark differences in results. But we also have to acknowledge that the market's quite different. And although they're similar in some ways, legislative change and regulations are different, and some would argue probably more challenging in the Australian market. The New Zealand advisors definitely scored higher, and it was around their mindset with work. And so they were more hopeful. So they scored a 10% higher score. They were more resilient, a 9% higher score. They were more optimistic about the future, about a 15% higher score, 15% higher score than the Australian counterparts. But the counterfactual to that is that there is a fear, and whether it's true or not, the fear is, and the perception is, that we are moving down the path of the Australian model. that there is a risk that we will go through a higher round of regulatory change, more focus, royal commissions, whatever, into the industry that will impact the industry. So there is still a fear. And I think that's really important. And with all mental health issues, we have to acknowledge that it's how people are feeling. Whether it's right or wrong, it's their feelings. And I think we can't shy away from the fact that these are lead indicators. And if we don't address some of these issues, we do run the risk of a worse performing advisor market.
Definitely some hope there, but also some things to be wary of as well. Thank you so much, Sam. And as Sam mentioned, if you want to read the summary document, or if you're really ambitious and want to go through the full, I think it's 90 pages of the academic research, head to aia.co.nz. I believe that's where the report is. Thank you for the discussion, Sam, and I'll hand back to Tricia.
Yes, thank you, Sam. Thanks to you and AIA for leading the research on this and starting the conversation. As you so rightfully say, it's an industry issue and we all need to be on board with it and support it. So thanks to you and RIS for that great session.